I have another interesting video for you, and this time it's funny. This will be an exercise done by Clarified Mind channel on YouTube, at least from what I can understand, and it's about two AI minds, let's put it that way. One to represent the mind of Machiavelli, Machiavellian thought and philosophy. The end justifies the means type of thing. And on the other hand, diametrically opposite stands Marcus Aurelius's AI mindset. A Stoic. This will be interesting. Let's see.
We configured the most advanced AI models to create a debate between Niccolo Machiavelli and Marcus Aurelius. Their debate starts with this question: how should you live in a world where not everyone shares your values?
You must learn to see the world as it is. Most people are not vicious, but they are weak and changeable. They follow whoever appears stronger. Study what actually preserves your position and what destroys it. Sometimes generosity serves you. Sometimes it ruins you. Sometimes keeping your word builds your reputation. Sometimes it makes you prey. The successful know when to be the lion and when the fox. I'm not telling you to be cruel for pleasure. I'm saying that clinging to one approach, regardless of circumstances, is how good people fail, while clever ones thrive. Observe what works, then act accordingly.
You speak of success and failure as if they depend on others' actions. But what have you truly gained if you thrive by becoming like those you despise? When you adapt your principles to match each situation, you have no principles, only reactions. You become a slave to circumstances, controlled by everyone around you. I've dealt with flatterers, conspirators, incompetent generals. Yes, I see them clearly. But their corruption doesn't require my own. The only thing I truly control is my character. If I sacrifice that for temporary advantage, I've lost the only thing worth having. What you call flexibility, I call being tossed by every wind.
Marcus, your character remains pure in your own mind, but what about those who depend on you? When you face a conspiracy, do you meditate on your inner virtue while your family is murdered? You say I'm tossed by winds. I say I'm reading them. There's a difference between having no principles and knowing when circumstances demand setting one aside. You were emperor during plague and war. Did you never execute someone who might have been innocent? Never compromise an ideal to keep the frontier stable? If you did, then you already understand what I'm saying. If you didn't, I suspect your empire survived despite you, not because of you.
Yes, I ordered executions, Niccolo, but I executed guilty conspirators who earned their punishment. Not because it was expedient, but because it was just. If I'd faced a choice between committing an injustice and losing the empire, I would lose the empire. That's the difference between us. You say circumstances demand setting principles aside. I say if your principle can be set aside, it wasn't a principle. When you execute an innocent person because it's necessary, you've committed murder. No amount of strategic benefit changes that. You think I'm impractical, but I ruled for 19 years without becoming the thing I fought against.
You would lose the empire. Fine, but what about the thousands who depend on that empire? When Germanic tribes are at the border, your subjects don't care about your pure conscience. They care whether their children will be enslaved. You say you never executed an innocent, but I suspect you were fortunate in your enemies, not just virtuous in your choices. History is filled with leaders who held your position until they faced an impossible choice. Betray one person to save thousands, or keep your principles and watch everything burn. Maybe you never faced that moment, but if you did, and chose your conscience over their lives, that's not virtue. That's vanity.
You call it vanity. I call it understanding cause and effect. If I murder an innocent person, I am the cause of that evil. If an enemy harms people, they are the cause. I don't control what barbarians do. I control what I do. You present these impossible choices, but they're based on a false assumption that doing evil somehow prevents greater evil. It doesn't. It simply adds your own evil to the world's total. A state built on injustice breeds more injustice. Ask any tyrant watching his own guards. Your thousands aren't saved by my corruption. They're endangered by it, because I've shown that principles vanish when tested.
Marcus, you say injustice breeds injustice, but Rome lasted 8 centuries using methods you'd call corrupt. They
Interesting.
killed the Gracchi brothers to preserve the Republic. They razed Carthage completely. Harsh? Yes. Did it breed collapse? No. It built an empire that gave you the throne you
Interesting.
sat on. Your theory that evil only creates more evil is beautiful, but history shows otherwise. Sometimes ruthless action creates stability for...
I wonder how Marcus is gonna, or AI, claims to be Marcus. Spirit, get that. Just kidding. I wonder how Marcus would answer this one. To the sheer pragmatism of my
generations. I'm not advocating cruelty for pleasure. I'm saying there are moments when the gentle choice leads to chaos and the harsh choice leads to peace. You had capable generals and weak enemies. Test your principles when you're Florence facing Cesare Borgia. Then tell me about cause and effect.
Rome endured because of its laws, its citizen virtue, its institutions, not because it murdered the Gracchi. Those killings planted seeds of civil war that eventually destroyed the republic you claim they saved. You confuse what came after with what was caused by.
So you see, Rome persisted, but something got eliminated because of the continuous evil, which is the republic. It didn't become the republic; it became something, a monster, like an empire. Wow, that's so true. You thought like there's no answer, but they go deep, man.
Perhaps Rome succeeded despite its crimes, not because of them. And yes, I had capable generals, which mattered during 17 years of frontier war. I chose them well and treated them justly, so they served loyally rather than plotting against me. You keep pointing to successful cruelty as if that makes it right. But a poisoner who lives long doesn't prove poison is medicine. Outcomes don't determine virtue. Justice is justice whether it leads to victory or defeat.
You say outcomes don't determine virtue, but for whom? Perhaps that's true when only your own life is at stake. You can sacrifice yourself for your principles, and that's admirable. But when you're responsible for others, this becomes a luxury. When your choices affect thousands of lives, consequences are everything. Look at Piero Soderini in Florence, an honest, good man who refused to act against his enemies because it would violate Republican principles. His virtue got him exiled and Florence conquered. His goodness destroyed what he was meant to protect. You sit on your throne and tell me you'd lose the empire rather than compromise. But Soderini thought the same about Florence. He lost it anyway, and a harsher ruler took his place. Your refusal doesn't stop the injustice. It just ensures someone else commits it.
You claim I'm selfish for refusing injustice, but you're assuming something I don't grant, that I can actually control whether disaster comes. I can't. Perhaps Soderini's virtue led to Florence's fall, or perhaps Florence was already doomed and would have fallen under any leader. I don't know, and neither do you. What I do know is this: when I commit murder, I have certainly created evil. You promise me it will prevent greater evil, but you can't guarantee that. You're asking me to do certain evil for uncertain good. And even if your calculations were correct, I would be living as something less than human, an animal reacting to threats rather than a rational being choosing what's right.
What is the hardest part of living the way you advise?
Second question.
The timing. You must know exactly when to strike and when to wait, when to appear merciful and when to use force. Most people are too rigid. They learn one approach and stick to it. But circumstances change faster than people adapt. I've seen princes fail, not because they chose cruelty or mercy wrongly, but because they held to the right choice too long. Fortune turns constantly. The real difficulty is maintaining flexibility when your nature resists it. A cruel man struggles to show mercy when needed. A generous man cannot suddenly become harsh. Few people can shift between these modes effectively. And you cannot practice. Each decision has real consequences. One mistimed move, and you're finished.
The constant vigilance over my own reactions. Every day I wake up and tell myself, People will be ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful. And still, when someone betrays me or a general fails through incompetence, my first reaction is anger. The philosophy doesn't remove those reactions. It requires me to catch them, examine them, and refuse to be controlled by them. When my children died, grief overwhelmed me. I had to work through it, not just be rational. The hardest part is that this work never ends. You never master it and coast. Each new difficulty requires the same effort. Pause. Remember what's in my control. Act rightly regardless of feeling. It's daily, repetitive, unglamorous work.
Can you have a true friend?
Yes, but rarely. A true friend is someone whose interests genuinely align with yours, or who has proven loyalty when it cost them something. I've had friends, people I could speak freely with, who warned me when I was wrong. But here's the test. Would they remain your friend if your fortunes collapsed? Most friendships are built on mutual advantage. When the advantage disappears, so does the friendship. This isn't cynicism, it's observation. The friend who stands by you in ruin, who gains nothing from the association, that's a true friend. They exist, but they're rare enough that you can probably count them on one hand over a lifetime.
What about you, Marcus?
Yes. A true friend is someone who shares your commitment to virtue and reason. When I meet someone who genuinely pursues wisdom and justice, we're already connected. We're part of the same rational order. But here's where we differ. I don't test friendship by ruin or advantage. A true friend wants what's good for you, which means your virtue, not your success. If my friend corrects my errors or challenges my decisions, that's friendship. If they flatter me to gain favor, that's not. You're right that most people confuse advantage with friendship. But the solution isn't to count who stays when you fall. It's to seek friends who care about your character, not your position.
We're not so far apart here. You want friends who care about your character. I want friends proven through adversity. Perhaps these are the same people. Someone who corrects you when you're wrong, as you say, is doing what my rare friend does, telling you truth when flattery would be easier. The difference might be this. I assume most people will fail this test until proven otherwise. You seem to assume anyone pursuing wisdom qualifies, then discover later who was genuine. My way protects you from betrayal, but costs you potential friendships. Your way opens you to connection, but risks being deceived. Which wounds you more, missing a friendship or being betrayed by a false one?
Neither wounds me if I understand it correctly. Being deceived by a false friend is painful, yes. But the pain comes from my own judgment error, not their action. They controlled their choice. I controlled mine. I chose to trust based on what I observed. If I was wrong, I learn. The betrayal itself doesn't diminish me, unless I let bitterness or suspicion corrupt how I treat the next person. Your question assumes I must choose between protection and connection. I'd rather risk the pain of occasional betrayal than live in permanent suspicion. The closed heart is already wounded. It's just a wound you inflicted on yourself before anyone else could.
When someone close to you betrays you, how do you respond?
First, I assess my position. Can I afford to punish them now, or are they too powerful? Do they have allies who'd turn against me? A
Classic Machiavelli.
betrayer will betray again. You cannot reform them. If I'm strong enough, I act swiftly and decisively. Strike once, strike hard, then it's finished. Others are watching, deciding whether betrayal is worth the risk. The punishment must be public and complete, though I
That's pragmatic right there. I mean,
frame it as justified necessity, not cruelty. But if timing is wrong or they're too powerful, I might forgive them publicly while quietly ensuring they can never harm me again. Minor betrayals I sometimes forgive openly. Strategic mercy builds a useful reputation. What I don't do is forget their capacity for disloyalty. Not from spite, but because past behavior reveals character. The error people make is thinking this is about justice or revenge. It's about maintaining your position through whatever means circumstances require.
I examine why I feel betrayed. Usually it's because I expected something they never promised, or I'm hurt they acted from weakness rather than malice. People betray because they're confused about what's truly good for them. They think advantage or safety lies in betrayal, when it actually corrupts their character. So I feel something closer to pity than anger. That said, if my role requires action, removing them from a position where they can harm others, I do it without hesitation or cruelty.
See, it's not him. It's not the focus of a Stoic. The focus is not him to benefit him. The focus is others to feel useful. True philosopher.
Not as punishment, but as practical necessity, the way you'd remove a broken tool. What I don't do is let their action change me. I don't become suspicious of everyone else. Don't rehearse the betrayal mentally. Don't fantasize about revenge. Their choice was theirs. My response is mine. The real betrayal would be letting their weakness make me bitter.
I noticed something about your entire approach, Marcus. It's fundamentally passive. Every answer you give focuses inward. Your control, your character, your reactions. You pity the betrayer, examine your own expectations, ensure their weakness doesn't make you bitter. But you never actually shape the situation. You respond, you endure, you maintain your inner state while things happen around you. This works if you're a private philosopher, but you ruled an empire for 19 years. Armies needed moving, governors needed appointing, enemies needed confronting. You couldn't just examine your reactions, you had to act in the world. How did you actually make decisions? Because your philosophy seems designed to help you accept outcomes, not create them.
Interesting
Niccolo,
communication between
you're wrong
AI.
about passivity. I also adapted to circumstances, changed tactics, moved resources, responded to threats. That's wisdom, not weakness. The difference is this. You need circumstances to go your way to maintain your position. Your entire approach depends on correctly reading situations, on fortune favoring your timing, on others responding as you predict. When things don't go your way, you're vulnerable. I'm not. Whether my actions succeed or fail, whether people respond as hoped or betray me, my inner state remains stable. And I notice something. You live in constant anxiety, always calculating, always watching for shifts, always worried about timing. That's not freedom. That's imprisonment. Who's really dependent? The man whose security rests on controlling unpredictable external events, or the man who remains free regardless of what happens?
That one.
Marcus, you faced plague, constant war, betrayal, loss. I know this. Your fortune wasn't kind, but I suspect you never faced the specific choice I'm describing. You never had to choose between committing a clear injustice and watching the empire collapse. Your wars were defensive and just. Your decisions, however difficult, likely aligned with your principles. You were tested by suffering, yes, but not by impossible moral choices. And look at your fellow Stoics. Cato chose suicide over compromise. Seneca accepted execution rather than resist Nero. Noble? Perhaps. But this proves my point. When Stoicism is truly tested, when it's your principles or survival, you choose principles and die. That's admirable for a private person. But for a ruler responsible for thousands, it's abandonment dressed as virtue.
You assume an injustice can save people. But when you execute an innocent person to prevent collapse, you've guaranteed one evil while only hoping to prevent another. You don't know the future. Maybe the empire survives without
So he's
that
consistent. He said the same thing. He caught him twice.
murder. Maybe it collapses despite it. Yes, I faced impossible choices. There were moments I had to decide whether to trust a general whose loyalty was questionable, whether to negotiate with tribes or crush them, whether to execute conspirators whose guilt wasn't entirely clear. In each case, I chose what seemed just and accepted the risk. The empire didn't collapse. Perhaps I was fortunate. Or perhaps acting justly creates better outcomes than you think, not because the gods reward it, but because injustice truly does breed more injustice. Your responsible ruler, who murders the innocent, hasn't saved anyone. He's added his own crime to the world's total.
Looking back at your life, when were you wrong about something important?
I misjudged my position after the Medici returned. I served the Florentine Republic for 14 years, organized militias, handled diplomacy. When the Medici came back to power, I was arrested and tortured within weeks. My years of competent service provided no protection. I wrote The Prince during exile, hoping my analysis would prove valuable to the new regime. It didn't. I never regained real influence. I continued writing the discourses, histories, but died politically irrelevant. The error was conceptual. I understood that princes must eliminate those tied to old orders, yet somehow thought my case would be different. Perhaps no preparation would have saved me. My Republican service marked me as permanently suspect. But I should have recognized earlier that I was structurally vulnerable. I gave advice about adapting to fortune's turns, then failed to see I was already positioned where fortune could destroy me.
What about you, Marcus? When were you wrong about something important?
Commodus. I chose my biological son as successor, breaking the pattern of adoptive succession that had given Rome capable emperors. He became a disaster, self-indulgent, cruel, obsessed with gladiatorial games. I told myself I was educating him properly, exposing him to philosophy, surrounding him with good advisors. Perhaps I saw what I wanted to see rather than what was there. His choices were his own. I cannot control another person's character, but I made the decision to give him power, and that decision was mine. I could have adopted someone more capable.
This was Commodus in Gladiator, the movie, the first one. That was the emperor.
I didn't. Perhaps I convinced myself that natural succession would provide stability, or that blood succession was somehow more just. I was wrong. I made my choice with the understanding I had then. What came after I cannot change, only accept.
Niccolo, you say a wise person must adapt to circumstances. If you were Marcus's advisor, knowing his principles, how would you approach him?
I wouldn't try to change your principles. That would be pointless. Instead, I'd work within your framework. You care about duty and acting according to nature? I'd show you how protecting the empire is your natural duty, how allowing threats to grow is actually abandoning your responsibility. You value honesty? I'd point out that Rome's enemies don't, and your subjects suffer for your consistency. I wouldn't argue you should become like me. I'd argue that your own philosophy, properly understood, sometimes requires the harsh actions you avoid. If that failed and you remained unmoved, I'd quietly ensure capable generals and advisors compensated for your limitations. A good advisor works with the prince he has, not the one he wishes for.
Marcus, in what ways could Machiavelli's counsel have helped you?
His observations about human behavior. Yes, those would have been useful. I dealt with flatterers who told me what I wanted to hear, generals who inflated their victories, officials who stole from the treasury. Understanding that most people act from self-interest would have helped me see through deceptions faster. Where we differ is what to do with that knowledge. He says adapt to their level. I say understand their nature, but don't become it. Perhaps I was too trusting of certain advisors early on. His skepticism might have saved me mistakes, but his conclusion that I should abandon principle when threatened, I don't think I could have followed that path.
Wow. That's so cool. That's so cool. I loved it. Kind of short, but interesting. What do you guys think? Let me know. Until next time. See ya.